Is it possible we get to the point where there is some sort of shortage on the industrial side, or how do you see that all
Oh,
fitting together?
I think the deficit is bigger than we think it is.
We have a deficit. We've seen the known inventories come down over the past 3 years. I don't,
Yep.
as you pointed out, I wouldn't say we're in code red territory where they're scrambling for the last bar by any means, but obviously you're very involved in the equity side.
Yep.
And we've talked to miners, talked to analysts, fund managers, and there's not a lot of money going in there. Even had a couple spurts this year from my perspective where a couple of times you had gold or silver up, a good percentage on a few days in a row and money came in, but we're not having capital go in to address this deficit. It's almost like you have a deficit, and rather than working things over time, getting permits done quickly, we're seeing the opposite of that. Is it possible we get to the point where there is some sort of shortage on the industrial side, or how do you see that all
Oh,
fitting together?
I think the deficit is bigger than we think it is because I think the informal supply was bigger than we thought it was. If you, I mean, I remember all the way back to the middle part of the decade of the 80s when Buffett suddenly reported to the world that he owned 15% of the world's above ground supplies of silver. That is to say, reported supplies. And the silver price just shot. That's before you were in the racket, I think. The silver price just shot up and then it collapsed. And of course, all the silver bugs said manipulation, manipulation. That's wrong. What happened is that the Indian rupee fell by 50% in US dollar terms, and the price of silver went up by 200% in US dollar terms. So, from the point of view of the Indian peasantry, the price of their silver went up by 400%. And that occurred in conjunction with a bad harvest in India, where the Indian peasants had a choice between keeping their silver and feeding their kids. Well, that was pretty straightforward. And a whole bunch of silver came out of inventory from a place that we didn't know it had been in inventory. The understanding that I have, and it's a very informal understanding, but the understanding that I have with the Gujarati precious metals trading community, an informal community, I call them traders, their government calls them smugglers, is that there has been substantial physical dishoarding of silver that has accompanied the reduction in the exchange rate between the Indian rupee and the US dollar. And I think that the offtake of physical silver from informal hoarders in emerging markets in favor of industrial application has been greater than we believe it is. We can observe it in official sectors. We can observe dishoarding from industrial refiners like Inglehart. What we don't see is the informal dishoarding that's taken place. And I suspect that the informal dishoarding has been much greater than we believe. And I think that the consequence of that will be that if I'm right about the direction of precious metals prices, that the adjustment, if that's the right word, between the paper market and the physical market could be, maybe not will be, but could be much more dramatic than we believe.
Well, I hope you've been enjoying this video series with Rick Rule talking about his behind the scenes look at what he saw during the silver squeeze in 2021. And the last one is coming up next. Although, if you want to hear what he thinks about whether we're finally going to see silver investors come back into the market, similar to how we have in gold, well, that one's coming up your way now.